Let me tell you a story about a man named Ethan and his fiancée, Sophia. Ethan thought he had found the love of his life, but he was about to discover a betrayal that would shake him to his core. It all started when Ethan met Sophia through a dating app. Unlike many other platforms designed for casual flings, this one was intended for people searching for meaningful relationships. At the time, Ethan was 33 and Sophia was 30. They matched, started chatting, and immediately hit it off. It was one of those rare connections where everything just seemed to fall into place. They had the same sense of humor, shared similar interests, and could talk for hours without ever getting bored. After a few weeks of talking online and over the phone, Ethan finally asked Sophia out on a real date. He was nervous, she was breathtakingly beautiful. Not that he thought of himself as unattractive, but Sophia was in another league entirely. He figured that someone like her must have endless options, so he convinced himself to just enjoy the moment and not get too attached. The date went better than he could have imagined. Every expectation he had from their conversations was met and exceeded in person. From that night forward, they started seeing each other regularly, and their relationship quickly became serious. However, there was one thing that always lingered in the back of Ethan's mind: the sheer amount of attention Sophia received from other men. Even when they were together, guys would shamelessly hit on her. She would sometimes laugh it off and tell Ethan about it, brushing it aside as nothing serious. At first, Ethan wasn't too worried. He trusted her, and she seemed genuinely invested in their relationship. He told himself he wouldn't be the jealous, insecure boyfriend. Things were great, really great, until one night, during a late-night conversation, they started talking about celebrity hall passes. The topic was lighthearted at first, just a silly discussion about which celebrities they found attractive. Then, Sophia made a comment that stuck with Ethan. "I don't think there are many celebrities who would say no to me," she said with a slight smirk. She was completely serious. Ethan forced a laugh, but something about that statement gnawed at him. He had always known she was beautiful, but hearing her say it with such confidence, as if she could have any man she wanted, made him uneasy. It seemed arrogant, out of character for her. He tried to brush it off, but the feeling lingered. Over the next few weeks, Ethan noticed small changes in Sophia's behavior. She started coming home later than usual, always with vague excuses. She became defensive when he asked about it. Something didn't feel right. Determined to uncover the truth, Ethan decided to take drastic measures. He hired a private investigator. It felt extreme, but he needed undeniable proof before making accusations. What followed was the longest 10 days of Ethan's life. Every late-night return, every weak excuse only confirmed his worst fears. When the investigator finally delivered the evidence, Ethan's world shattered. Photos, timestamps, locations, all of it laid out in black and white. Sophia was cheating. Now Ethan had to decide what to do next. The woman he loved had betrayed him, and he was about to confront her. Ethan waited until Sophia came home that evening. He had spent the entire day rehearsing what he would say, but now that the moment was here, his stomach churned with nerves. He sat at the kitchen table, the envelope containing the damning evidence in front of him. His hands trembled slightly as he tapped his fingers against the table, trying to steady his emotions. When Sophia walked in, she barely glanced at him before heading toward the bedroom. "Hey," Ethan called out, his voice calm but firm. She turned, surprised to see him sitting there in such a serious manner. "Hey, what's up?" she asked, feigning casualness. "Sit down," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. She hesitated, a flicker of suspicion crossing her face, but she complied. Ethan took a deep breath. "I know." Sophia blinked. "Know what?" "I know about Cody," he said, his voice laced with restrained anger. Her face paled. For a split second she looked like a deer caught in headlights, but then just as quickly she recovered, her expression hardening. "I don't know what you're talking about." Ethan slid the envelope across the table. "Go ahead. Open it." She hesitated, then slowly reached for the envelope and pulled out the photos. As she flipped through them, her face remained unreadable. But he could see the slight tightening of her jaw, the tension in her shoulders. After a long pause, she sighed and set the pictures down. "Okay," she admitted. "You caught me." Ethan clenched his fists. "That's it? That's all you have to say?" "What do you want me to say, Ethan?" she snapped. "That I'm sorry? That I regret it? Because I don't." His breath caught in his throat. He had expected denials, excuses, maybe even tears. But this cold indifference? It was worse than he ever could have imagined. Sophia leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "Look, I wasn't happy. You were nice, but you're just not enough for me. I need excitement. I need someone who makes me feel alive. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. The woman he had loved, the woman he had planned a future with, was looking him in the eyes and telling him he wasn't enough. Something inside him snapped. He pushed back his chair and stood up. You know what, Sophia? You're right. I'm not enough. But I'll tell you one thing, you're not worth it. For the first time, her confident demeanor faltered. Ethan. Save it, he cut her off. Pack your things. I want you out of my apartment by tomorrow. She opened her mouth to protest, but he was already walking away. For the first time in weeks he felt relief. Sophia had shattered his heart, but she had also set him free. And Ethan? He was going to rebuild his life, without her. Part 2, The Shadows of Doubt. Let me tell you, the worst kind of pain isn't the one that hits you all at once. It's the slow, creeping kind, the one that eats away at you piece by piece until there's nothing left but a hollow shell of what used to be trust. That's what it felt like as Olivia's behavior continued to shift right before my eyes. At first, I kept telling myself I was overthinking it. I told myself that work really was stressing her out, that maybe she was just in a rough patch. But the excuses started stacking up. She was coming home late more often, and when I asked why, the answers felt mechanical, empty. She barely made eye contact anymore, and when she did, it was like she was seeing right through me. The warmth in her touch was fading, the laughter between us growing rare. Something was wrong. And the worst part? I didn't know if I wanted to find out the truth. The signs became impossible to ignore. She was always on her phone more than ever before. I'd catch her smiling at messages, quickly tucking her phone away the moment I entered the room. Calls that used to happen in front of me were now taken in hushed whispers behind closed doors. If I asked, she would shrug it off, say it was just her mom or a friend from work. But I knew better. One evening as we were eating dinner, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and for just a second I saw something in her expression. Hesitation, guilt, something. Then, as if catching herself, she quickly pushed her chair back. "I'll be right back," she muttered, disappearing into the bedroom, shutting the door behind her. I sat there, fork frozen in midair, my appetite gone. My heart pounded in my chest, a steady drumbeat of dread. That was the moment I knew. Days passed, and with every moment, my mind spiraled deeper into suspicion. The distance between us grew, thick like an invisible wall I couldn't break through. Then came the night she told me she was going out with coworkers. She said it so casually, barely looking up as she fixed her hair in the mirror. "It's just a work thing. I won't be too late." A kiss on the cheek and she was gone. The moment the door shut, something inside me snapped. I grabbed my keys and followed. My pulse raced as I trailed her car, keeping a safe distance. I wasn't sure what I expected to find, but deep down I already knew. She pulled into a restaurant parking lot, and I found a spot across the street. My hands clenched the steering wheel as I watched her step out, scanning the area like she was looking for someone. And then he arrived. Tall, confident, with that easy charm that made my stomach churn. He walked right up to her, and without hesitation she smiled, really smiled, and let him kiss her. I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. It felt like my world was caving in. Every moment we had shared, every touch, every whispered, "I love you," felt like a cruel joke. I sat there for what felt like hours, watching them disappear into the restaurant, laughing, completely at ease. Like this wasn't the first time. Like this was their routine. My body shook with anger, heartbreak, disbelief. I wanted to storm in there, demand answers, make a scene. But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed proof, something undeniable. I took a deep breath, reached for my phone, and started planning. If she thought she could lie to me and get away with it, she was dead wrong. Part 3, Beneath the Surface. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. Her smile, his hands on her waist, the way she looked at him like I no longer existed. By morning I was running on fumes, but my mind was clear. I had to play this smart. Confronting her without solid proof could backfire. She could lie, twist the story, make me doubt what I had seen with my own eyes. No, I needed undeniable evidence. Something that even she wouldn't be able to talk her way out of. That's when I made the call. Hiring a private investigator felt surreal, like something out of a movie. But I wasn't taking chances. I wanted every detail, every meeting, every lie exposed. The investigator listened calmly as I explained the situation. When I finished, he didn't sound surprised. He had heard it all before. "Give me 10 days, he said. "We'll find out exactly what's going on." Those 10 days were the longest of my life. Every moment with Olivia felt like a test, a challenge to keep my emotions in check. She still kissed me goodbye in the mornings, still laughed at my jokes, but it was all hollow, forced. The paranoia took over my mind. Every word she spoke, every moment she hesitated before answering my questions, it all seemed rehearsed. I found myself analyzing her every move, waiting for some kind of slip-up. I spent my nights scrolling through our old messages, trying to pinpoint the exact moment she changed. But it was impossible to tell. She had played the part so well. And then, on the 7th night, I got the call. "We've got something," the investigator said. "Meet me in the morning." I barely made it through the night. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't rest. I rehearsed a dozen different scenarios in my head. Maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought, maybe she had a reasonable explanation. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But deep down I knew better. By the time I arrived at his office, my hands were shaking. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were photos. Olivia, the man, holding hands, kissing, disappearing into an apartment together. Everything inside me went numb. It was real. The woman I had planned to marry, the woman I had trusted with everything, was living a double life. "She's been seeing him for at least 2 months, the investigator said. Same place, same routine. I stared at the evidence, my mind racing. 2 months. All the while, she had looked me in the eyes and told me she loved me. She had come home to me, slept in my arms, knowing she was betraying me. The rage that built inside me was unlike anything I had ever felt. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to breathe. "What do you want to do next?" the investigator asked. I exhaled slowly. "I want to end this. On my terms." "But how? How do you confront the person you love, knowing they've shattered everything you believed in?" My head was a storm of emotions: anger, heartbreak, disbelief. I wanted to scream at her, to demand answers, but at the same time, I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal without me having to say a word. I spent the next few hours alone, sitting in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The images from the folder lay scattered on the passenger seat, taunting me. I picked them up one by one, memorizing every detail, the way she smiled at him, the way she leaned into his touch. It was the same way she used to look at me. At some point, I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, the sun was setting. My phone buzzed. It was Olivia. "Hey babe, I'm gonna be a little late tonight. Work's crazy." "Work, right." I stared at the message, my stomach twisting. I could feel the blood rushing through my veins, the urge to drive straight home and wait for her to return so I could throw the truth in her face. But something held me back. No, not yet. I needed to be patient. I needed to make sure she never saw it coming. I spent the next few days preparing. I gathered everything: the photos, screenshots of her messages that seemed suspicious, call logs. I wanted an airtight case. No room for excuses, no chance for manipulation. Then I planned the moment. I set up a dinner for us at home, something romantic. Candlelight, her favorite wine, soft music playing in the background. I wanted her to think everything was normal, that I was still the clueless fool she had been deceiving. When she walked through the door, her eyes lit up. "Wow, what's all this?" she asked, setting her bag down. I smiled. "Just wanted to do something special for us." She kissed me, and for the first time I felt nothing. No warmth, no love. Just emptiness. We sat down to eat. She chatted about her day, about how exhausted she was from work. I nodded along, pretending to listen, letting her dig herself deeper. Then, just as she took a sip of her wine, I slid the folder across the table. She froze. Her eyes flickered from me to the folder, hesitation creeping onto her face. "What's this?" she asked, her voice suddenly cautious. "Go ahead," I said. "Open it." She hesitated for a long moment before finally reaching for the folder. The second she saw the photos, her face drained of color. Her hands trembled. She started, but no words came out. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "So?" Tears welled in her eyes. "It's not what it looks like." I laughed, shaking my head. "Oh really? Because it looks a hell of a lot like you sneaking off to meet another man." Repeatedly. She opened her mouth, then closed it. No more lies. No more excuses. She knew she was caught. "Say something," I demanded. Tears streamed down her face, but I felt no sympathy. "Not anymore." "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered. I scoffed. "You never meant to hurt me? You've been lying to me for months. Sleeping next to me every night while sneaking around with him. And you never meant to hurt me?" I was confused, she pleaded. I didn't know what I wanted. Bullshit. The silence between us was deafening. Finally, she dropped her head into her hands, sobbing. I pushed back my chair and stood up. "It's over, Olivia." She looked up at me, desperation in her eyes. "Please?" But I was done listening. Done playing the fool. I turned and walked away, leaving her there with nothing but the wreckage of her own choices. Part 4. Shadows of Betrayal. The air was thick with tension, every moment stretching endlessly as if time itself had slowed to a cruel, deliberate crawl. I sat in my car just a block away from the apartment building, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart pounded like a war drum in my chest, a steady rhythm of dread and anticipation. I was here for the truth, for the final, undeniable confirmation of what my gut had been screaming at me for weeks. And yet, some part of me, some foolish, desperate part, still clung to the sliver of hope that this was all a terrible misunderstanding. The investigator's words echoed in my head, replaying like a haunting melody I couldn't silence. Your suspicions were correct. I had spent nights staring at those damning photos, pictures of the woman I loved, the woman I had envisioned a future with, wrapped in the arms of another man. The sight of her laughing, kissing, and holding hands with him had burned itself into my memory, each image like a dagger twisting deeper into my chest. And yet, despite the overwhelming evidence, I hadn't confronted her. Not yet. I needed to see it for myself. So here I was, waiting in the shadows, watching the apartment entrance like a hunter tracking its prey. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows as if nature itself shared my fury. Then, just as I was beginning to doubt my resolve, she appeared. She stepped out of a sleek black car, her laughter carried through the night like a whisper of betrayal. My breath caught in my throat. There was no mistaking her silhouette, no mistaking the way she tossed her hair back, no mistaking the man beside her. He was tall, confident, and far too comfortable standing so close to her. My stomach clenched as I watched her lean into him, their bodies brushing together in a way that made my blood boil. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. The moment I had dreaded was unfolding right before my eyes, shattering every illusion I had held onto. There was no turning back now. I stepped out of my car, the cold night air slapping me in the face like a cruel wake-up call. My legs felt heavy as if they were resisting what I was about to do. But I forced myself forward, one step at a time, until I stood just feet away from them. She hadn't noticed me yet, too caught up in her deceit to even glance around. But when I spoke, her entire body stiffened. So this is where you've been sneaking off to. Her head snapped toward me, eyes wide with shock. For a moment, she just stared as if I were a ghost materializing from thin air. The man beside her, Cody or whatever his name really was, looked between us, his smirk faltering. What are you doing here?" she stammered, stepping away from him as if that could erase what I had just witnessed. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "You tell me." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. There was no excuse, no plausible lie that could explain this away. And I wasn't in the mood to hear one anyway. Cody finally found his voice, his tone laced with irritation. "Look man, I don't know what you think is happening here." "Oh, I know exactly what's happening," I interrupted, my voice dangerously low. "And so does she." Her face paled, and for a brief moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Was it guilt? Regret? Or was she simply panicked at being caught? I reached into my pocket, pulling out the envelope of photos the investigator had given me. Without breaking eye contact, I tossed them onto the ground between us. They scattered in the wind, some landing at her feet, others fluttering down the street like ghosts of our broken past. She bent down slowly, her hands trembling as she picked one up. As her eyes scanned the image, her breath hitched. She knew there was no escaping this. "Please," she whispered, looking up at me. "It's not what it looks like." I scoffed. "That's the best you've got?" Tears welled in her eyes, but I wasn't sure if they were real or just another act. I had seen enough. I had endured enough. Cody, clearly uncomfortable, took a step back. "Listen, I don't want to be involved in any drama. Maybe you two should talk this out." I turned to him, my expression unreadable. "You've already involved yourself in it. But don't worry, I'm not here for you." He hesitated for a moment before nodding and making a quick exit, disappearing into the night like the coward he was. Now it was just the two of us. She took a shaky step forward. I made a mistake." I shook my head, swallowing the lump in my throat. "No. A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday. A mistake is misplacing your keys. This was a choice." Repeatedly. A sob escaped her lips, but I didn't move to comfort her. Not this time. I had spent too long being blind, too long ignoring the warning signs. And now the truth was standing before me, undeniable and irreversible. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I deserved better than this," I said, my voice firm despite the storm raging inside me. "And you know it." She reached out as if to touch me, but I stepped back. The distance between us had never felt wider. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Turning on my heel, I walked away, leaving her standing there among the scattered remnants of our broken past. The night swallowed me whole, but for the first time in weeks, I welcomed the darkness. Because I knew, without a doubt, that a new dawn was waiting on the other side. Title: The Final Reckoning. The moment had arrived. The weight of everything that had happened was pressing down on me, but I wasn't going to let it break me. I had fought too hard, endured too much, and now it was time to bring it all to an end. As I stood outside the door, my heart pounded in my chest, a rhythmic drumming that echoed the storm raging inside me. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about closure, about reclaiming my life from the wreckage she had left behind. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. She was sitting on the couch, oblivious to what was coming. When she saw me, her face lit up with that same charming smile that had once made me weak. But I wasn't weak anymore. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but cold. She blinked, sensing the shift in my tone. "What's wrong?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the photos. The damning evidence of her betrayal. I didn't say a word, I just placed them on the table in front of her. The color drained from her face. Where did you get these?" she stammered, her hands shaking as she flipped through them. "Does it matter?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. "I know everything. The lies, the late nights, the man you thought you could keep hidden from me. It's all here." She opened her mouth to speak, to deny it, to weave another lie, but the look in my eyes stopped her. She knew there was no escaping this. I was going to tell you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I laughed, a bitter sound that filled the room. "When? After the wedding? After you had squeezed every last bit of love and trust out of me? No, Chloe. You weren't going to tell me anything." She started to cry, but I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just emptiness. "I never meant to hurt you," she sobbed. "But you did," I said. "And now I'm done." I stood up, my decision made. I had spent too much time in the shadow of her deceit. It was time to walk away, to reclaim my life, and to find happiness on my own terms. Without another word, I turned and walked out the door, leaving her behind with nothing but the weight of her own betrayal. As I stepped into the night, a strange sense of peace washed over me. The storm had passed. And in its wake I found something I never expected: freedom. A final word to our readers. Life has a way of testing us in the most unexpected ways, and sometimes betrayal and heartbreak lead to the greatest transformations. If there's one thing to take away from this story, it's that resilience and self-worth are the keys to overcoming any obstacle. No matter how dark the situation may seem, remember that you have the strength to rise above it and find something even better waiting on the other side. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more gripping stories your way. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in this situation? Until next time, stay strong and stay true to yourself.